So in the next about 55 minutes or so, I want to walk through the form itself. The first thing that I want to make sure of is that you are using the most up-to-date form. Step one, the biggest reason to get kicked out or not get an entry qualified for NAFTA is because you're using an old form. So in the US, if something gets published in the Federal Register, normally there is what the US calls an informed compliance period. Maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's a year that says, this is getting ready to come down. Make sure you're ready by date X. In Mexico, their version of the Federal Register says on Monday, if I said so, on Tuesday it is so. This is where very recently, I'm going to hit on this about 4 times, and that is right here, and that is the magic email. We have had customs in the past week reject multiple NAFTAs for not having email addresses on them. Even though in the US it says it's still not an actual requirement until January 1. It was published in the US, Mexico published it, so now it's law. There, that's it. We've had a lot of people not get rejected, but anytime that we go on a doc review or something, we're getting them thrown out because of the email. Something to be alert of, something that if you have some blankets, you might want to double check them. Make sure you added an email to them because you don't want something getting stuck. So number one is the exporter. Exporter is very simple. Are you the person exporting the product, right? Follow money. Is your sale leaving this country? If that's the case, you're the exporter. Now, if you are selling this product domestically, you are not the exporter. It's a domestic sale, unless we get to a triangle transaction. My assumption is you're not the exporter. You sold it to somebody else who's then going to export this product. Don't fill one of these out as the exporter, you're not it. Then you might be the producer, right? And the producer is, did you actually make this product? Or did you buy it from somebody else? Now, if you bought it from somebody else and you don't want to tell who your producer is, it is more than okay here to put your email address and say available to customs upon request. And then that way you don't have to supply your source to your customer. You have to tell customs later on is if you were the producer or not. So going back to some of the work that we've done, I see lots of people that come to me and I get one that says available to customs upon request. And then in here it says yes. I'm like, well, are you the producer or are you not? And they're like, well, I didn't make it. I was like, well, okay, change that to no then. So, or if it's yes, I'm like, well, just add your name of the producer. It's not a big deal. Because if you're the one making it, why does it matter?
If we have both?
Yes, so you put multiple people yes for one line and no for one line?
Yes.
And then put upon request on the top box?
Yes, you could. I would recommend not, just simply because, like I said, Mexican customs officials, however they woke up that day is what their decisions are that day.
So that's going to raise flags pretty much, is
Yes.
what you're saying.
Yes. To me, it's simpler to keep 2 of these, one for the products that you manufacture, one for ones that you don't. So blanket period, I would recommend most people do blanket period. You can go up to a calendar year. Most of them we see are January 1 through December 31. I'm sure any of you that sell product in Mexico have already been beaten up by all of your customers asking for new NAFTAs. That process normally starts around the end of 3rd quarter. So then the first question I always get next is, well, sourcing still hasn't made the decision of where we're buying this product next year. That's the first question. Now what do we do? My comment is you issue one to them with what you know today, and you clearly tell them that this may change. And as long as you can prove that, so let's say you issued this and you find out from sourcing in February that they've actually changed something, and now they're sourcing product that's not US anymore, now they're sourcing it from China, and it disqualifies the product from NAFTA, you have to tell your supplier immediately or your buyer. And as long as you can prove that you have told them immediately, if they continue to claim, it is no longer your problem. If you can't prove that you have told them that something has changed, it is your problem because then you are falsely qualifying goods for NAFTA.
Do you have to fill out a blanket period?
If you don't fill out a blanket period, then you have to do one for every shipment. Most NAFTA groups are going crazy right now and will go crazy all the way up to January until they can finally breathe again. Because they're requesting NAFTAs and producing them like crazy right now for January 1st. Item 4, if you're producing individual ones, a lot of people will fill out number 4, say this is actually who I'm selling it to, which is the importer. If you're producing blankets, most people will put in here various, which is okay. We have had some clients go in and go ahead and make one of these for each of their importers. It's okay. It's not against any rules or anything.
What about the email part of that then? Because like with the producer, it's available upon request and your email. On the importer, I would expect they just want an importer email or your.
Various, I would put your email, and they can contact you, the importer. So I guess I should add, any questions on boxes 1 through 4?
What kind of email are you putting in? The exporter name, just like a generic email address, or the person that filled the form out?
For the exporter?
Yeah.
So if you're filling this out, who's responsible? Who's the one doing this? So I would put the same email address as you do in box 11, which is where you sign it and certify it. So that's a lot cleaner and easier. Any other questions in these boxes?
And put in a generic company email address.
Oh, absolutely. So like Scarborough has an email, it's like that is info@scarborough-intl.com. Yes, that's okay. When I hear generic, I think of one that actually doesn't work. When someone asks you to sign up for something and you put in something 123@gmail.com, well, it's not coming to you. So, all right, let's move down into the middle section of the form. Description of goods. Provide a full description of each good. Should be sufficient enough for customs to be able to look at your product and look at the NAFTA and say, yep, this is the same thing. We have a lot of clients that are starting to literally print off parts lists and use the identical descriptions and then get printed on their commercial invoice. Well, there's no duplicate work, the same exact description, hopefully it makes life a little easier. Does that make sense to everyone? We've had some people even go as far as listing part numbers.
We did that.
Yeah.
Quantity for numbers and same description.
Yes. It's not uncommon at all to see part numbers and descriptions identical on both. Be specific. Don't just say nuts and bolts, or don't just say, be specific here. The HS tariff classification number. This is only to 6 digits. I'll say it again, 6 digits. Only put 6 digits on here. Don't put all 10. I send more of these back to people. We get more of them sent back saying, well, they have 10 digits, they're only supposed to have 6. Here's the problem with the 10. International nomenclature for the tariff is 6 digits long. The first 6 digits, in theory, are supposed to be identical across most of the modern nations. They're not. We can't even get our own Schedule B and HTS to match all the time to the 6 digits, so I don't know how we expect all the governments in the world to coordinate this. So that is the problem, is the 6 digits. I'm sure lots of people will also get in arguments with their supplier on what's the correct tariff classification. You think it's X, they think it's Y. The rules of origin of NAFTA are identical across the board. Customs has come out, going right up. They just put it out maybe 2 months ago, not even that long ago, that they will actually help you in a foreign country with product classification. So if you're exporting something and all of a sudden you're in a big problem, some overseas country, they will actually help you through the process, which I found was really interesting that they're willing to do that. They also just solicited private donations about 2 weeks ago too for helping them do some infrastructure projects. So they're going definitely outside the box of what customs does. The preference criterion. I'm going to walk through these real quick. Does anyone claim A on the preference criterion? I hope the answer is no. We're doing something good. A reads as the good is wholly obtained or produced inside of, in the territory of one or more of the NAFTA countries. So I'm talking about items that may be grown here, pull the carrot out of the ground. Maybe you can claim A now, but that's about it. So A throws up red flags because the majority of any product going into Mexico is going to claim some form of non-originating material. Whether it is a bolt or a screw, you buy everything here, but you buy your screws that holds this thing together, and you have 4 of them. It's not A anymore. Because there is something in there that's not entirely produced in one of the NAFTA countries. So big red flag there. Keep wanting to hit this thing this way, it's over there. B, the good is produced entirely in the territory of one or more of the NAFTA countries and satisfies the specific rules of origin that apply to its tariff classification. How many people use B? Should be most of you, would be my assumption, probably use B. So B is when we get into the conversation we had earlier here about going through the process of qualifying each individual part. and not making blanket statements, especially when it comes to NAFTA. Making sure that each individual product actually qualifies, doing the math problem, making sure the tariff shift is real, making sure that the tariff numbers that it's coming from and to actually exist, things like that. That's when you get to claim B. B is probably what I'm going to go out and say 98% of everything crossing should cross as. Now, what it actually crosses as, don't know for sure. We have the tariff shift and the regional value content. The math problem for regional value content is pretty simple. So you take the transaction value. There's two ways to do it. There's transaction value and net cost. Transaction value is you take the transaction value of the product. So you sold a microphone for $10. The value of the non-originating material in this microphone is $2. So, and then you would divide that. So you'd have $8 of originating material divided by the entire transaction amount. There's 80%, right? That probably qualifies this for NAFTA. There's also a net cost. Net cost is you take, instead of saying, you're taking your costs instead of the transaction value. Instead of the sell side, you're looking at the buy side of the transaction. There are some tariff numbers that will list both when you're looking at the tariff. It says the product has to be X% if you use transaction value, or Y if you use net cost, because there is going to be some fluctuation in there. But once again, you have to look at every tariff number. I can't say it enough today, because if you don't, that's where people run into problems. Questions on B? C. The good is produced entirely in a territory of one or more of the NAFTA countries exclusively from originating. Under this criterion, one of the materials may not fall within the definition of fully produced, but they must qualify as originating. So maybe you have, so this would be if you bought a sub-assembly that then goes into something, you can claim C. It's a little bit more difficult to follow that process. If you can get it, I would still rather claim B. C's do trigger closer scrutiny. C's require more work on the part. D. Goods are produced entirely in the territory of one or more than NAFTA countries, how every one of these starts, but do not meet the applicable rules of origin because certain non-originating materials do not undergo the required tariff shift. However, they do meet the regional value contents. They're like, well, now what do I do? There are two places that this is okay. One, the good was imported in the territory of an NAFTA country in an unassembled form, but was classified as an assembled good. Here's an example. You import bicycles, but you want to say that they were assembled in the United States. So you import all the parts. Let's say you imported 100 bicycles in one container. There's exactly 200 wheels, there are 100 sets of handlebars, and you go through every part and they work out exactly in those spares. You classified them as bicycles because that's allowed in the tariff. You don't classify each part in that scenario. In that case, you can claim D still because you're not adding enough value to it to make that shift. Or you are, but there is no, they don't undergo a change in tariff classification because a bike is a bike is a bike. You can't change tariff classification of bike. Does that one make sense? Does that rule make sense?
The cost of putting the bike together
Added enough value.
to make the regional value.
So one thing here, don't cheat. We've had a few people get very close and say, well, if I just sold it for $10 more, the math would all work out in my favor. And so they just call it good and they move on down the road. And the issue, maybe they issue 2 invoices, maybe they issue 1 invoice and then get less of a payment from the supplier. So don't cheat. If it doesn't qualify, it doesn't qualify. Look at your sourcing. There are other ways to go around this and trying to cheat on these. Or number 2, in this scenario, the goods incorporated, provided for as parts. So there are special tariff classifications in the tariff that say, or parts thereof. Those also can't undergo a change in tariff classification. But you might do something to them. You might add enough value. They're still classified as parts when they leave, but you've added enough value that potentially you can still claim NAFTA.
Question
Yes.
on the value added portion.
Mhm.
You mentioned somebody saying, well, I'll just charge $10 more. How is that actually calculated? Is it on the buy side, say if you're doing labor? If I'm adding $50 of labor, of my labor, but then I end up charging an extra $100 to the end customer, then what amount is calculated for that body weight?
Which one are you using? That's the first question.
Okay.
So in transaction values, what are you selling for,
Right.
right? Obviously in the net, it's basically the buy side of that transaction. What is your cost to buy it and what is your cost to make it?
So you determine the amount.
The tariff's gonna identify which one, or the
In
401's gonna be.
potentially, yes, the tariff will, not always. Sometimes it's as simple as a tariff shift and the math probably doesn't matter. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes it says it has to both make a tariff shift and qualify. Sometimes, like we saw in D, when you can't make a tariff shift, there is still just a math problem that can happen.
So the requirements for the particular tariff will tell you whether or not you use transaction value or
Most of
cost.
them say both.
Okay.
Most of them that have them have both. The automotive is the only section that gets out of that process. Most of these will say something like, if it's 60% transaction value or 50% net, then you're good to go.
So that would be what the benefit would be.
Right. Sometimes you can, maybe you're selling something at an extremely low margin, but on the buy side, obviously you qualify, but you can't on the net because your margin's low, you're selling it at cost for some reason because you've made a decision to do so. So a couple of issues with D, it's not simply a value rule. So it kind of reads like that, but it's definitely not. The de minimis rule is also part of this as well. It can be confirmed that 93% of the components are of, I'll say, NAFTA origin, so US, Mexico, Canada. The 7% can be discounted, but then there's a little note, of course, be careful because the allowance doesn't apply to all HTS items. So customs has no overarching rules. There's an exception to everything. I don't know of any rules that there isn't some exception to somewhere in the book. So as this says, it's better to find more than 93% to avoid any scrutiny. If you're at 98, you're probably pretty safe. Textiles are their own beast, chapter 61, 62, and 63. For any of you that do free trade agreements in general, textiles tend to be their own beast inside of any of them, whether they be GSP or anywhere else. So just note that for textile products. E and F, certain automatic data processing goods, i.e. computers. You can't find the word computer in the tariff. In 2015, it doesn't exist. Can't find the word laptop either. It says portable automatic data processing machine, which I find comical. We have not quite gotten to the computer laptop piece of this. So that's specifically what that is for, and it's for things that travel as part of certain automatic data processing goods in their parts specified in specific annex to NAFTA. Don't go read NAFTA, it's there. That don't originate, so let's say you have a computer attached to something, you know, in some instances you can use that and claim that computer as part of it even though it's related to not. F is agricultural goods, A, B, or C, and it's not subject to quantitative restrictions, quota. Anybody that's on anything, there's a sugar quota for stuff coming out of Mexico right now. And we only import so much at a time. If we do, there's certain rates that have to be imported out. So that was 7. I know we kind of buzzed through that very quickly. I'm trying to keep us on track and on time. 8, the producer. If you made this, but yes, very simple. You didn't make it, but no. Also very simple. However, if you put a no, you also need a number 1, a number 2, or a number 3 that follow that no. And those, the reason for those is you have to tell customs why, if you didn't make this, can you qualify this product as NAFTA? Obviously, if you made it, you're going to know the answer to that question. But if you didn't make it, how did you know? If you put a 1, your knowledge of whether the good qualifies as an originating good. You used to work at the company that made these, and you know for a fact that it's qualifying goods. That's an example of a 1. There's publicly available knowledge that says this is made in the NAFTA countries. 2, your reliance on the producer's written representation, other than a certificate of origin, that the good qualifies as an originating good. So 2, you would see things if you have your vendors issue things like manufacturer's affidavits, right? This is what this was made. I certify this was made here, I made this product, and it is whatever percent either originating, or I certify that it qualifies for NAFTA. That's your CYA. Or 3, they actually give you another NAFTA, which is probably the most common. 2 and 3 are the most common. When we solicit these for our clients, I get 3, probably 95% of the time. I get another NAFTA that then I review and go from there. Sometimes I do get 2s, just because someone does not want to issue a NAFTA on something that they don't feel they're required to. It's very common to see it, but for the most part, I get just another NAFTA. Or an actual country of origin cert that might not be a NAFTA, but it is a country of origin. So any questions here? For those of you who aren't the manufacturer, does this make sense?
So 2, you can't rely on certificate of origin, but 3, you can rely on certificate of origin?
So 1, wrong button. 1 is you just know it. Inherently, you know this product was made here in the US. 2 is they have given you some kind of written representation. Let's say it's a manufacturer's affidavit, but not a certificate of origin. Or 3, they gave you a certificate of origin. So that's
not necessarily NAFTA, a certificate of origin.
Certificate of origin.
Okay.
Right. But for NAFTAs, most people just give other NAFTAs. I don't see too many certificates of origin US. You see them in some cases because the tariff number might not qualify. There might be something that doesn't qualify for NAFTA because of the NAFTA rules, but because of the US origin rules, it actually does qualify as US origin. There are some of those that exist out there. Field 9, net cost. We'll go back where we talked about transaction value and cost. For each good described in field 5, so each one of those part numbers, where the good is subject to a regional value content requirement. So this is only if in the tariff book it says it needs to meet a value requirement. If you used NC, if you did net cost, or no, if you didn't use net cost. I'll say it again. So if you're looking at this form, there will be line items that don't have anything here. If you have a ruler and you're going down line by line, there'll be blanks here. And blanks are okay.
Mommy.
Blanks are okay because not every tariff number requires a value content. The tariff shift, customs may have considered it enough when they signed that. So you will see some blanks here, and that's okay. And it says also, if most people don't do this, most people just say they show for individual product, but if you used it over a section of time, you have to identify the beginning and ending dates of that period. So we've seen this a couple of times, more on like the commodities side of the business, where people are buying bulk at rates that vary, and they can't necessarily say this is the rate or this is where I bought that, but over the course of the year, I bought it for X on average. And then they use that number as the beginning of the year. 10, country of origin. Identify the name of the country to which the preferential rate of treatment applies. So on the NAFTA, we have, if it was made in Mexico, MX. In US, US. In Canada, CA. Pretty cut and dry. If there is joint production in one of the NAFTA countries, you actually use J&T for joint production with them. So if you buy something in Mexico, you get it, you put value into it here, and maybe you sell it back to Mexico, or then you sell it to Canada, joint would probably be where that, or could potentially be where that falls in. So the last piece of this, has anyone ever actually read this? I always ask, because most people have never read it. We were just talking about someone who just signed stuff. You send something to someone and they just sign it. I said, next time send it to them and, say you'll pay for all my customs brokerage for a year and see if they just sign it and send it back to you. But one, the information on this document is true and accurate, and so I, this person, assume the responsibility for proving such representation. I understand that I am liable for any false statements or material omissions made in our connection with this document. So know what you're doing. This also goes back to if you're accepting these, we tell people who signed them, right? Did someone with knowledge actually sign it? Or, let me tell you how many times I see like secretary on here because part of their role, they are receptionist, right? They sit at the front desk and part of their role is they get a big stack of these and they just sign them and send them out. Do they have any idea if that product actually qualifies? They have none. They don't even know what they're signing. They're just signing because someone said, here, sign these. So they sign them and send them on. So it's one thing we always advise people to check. Who signed it? If it's someone you don't think had any knowledge of this product, you're okay to question them. Say, why is this person signing it? Now, if the production manager signed it, okay. Purchasing, okay. You know, it doesn't have to be an officer. You're not looking for vice president or something like that on there. But look for someone who in just your own common sense has knowledge of what's going on there. Not somebody who just signs these things as part of their job. Because somebody gave them a bunch of them. If their title's NAFTA analyst, probably okay. You know. So the second bullet point, I agree to maintain and present upon request the documentation necessary to support the certificate and to inform, and this is what we talked about earlier, inform in writing all persons that when the certificate was given if any changes could affect the accuracy or validity. This goes back into if someone wants it in August and purchasing hasn't made that decision, right? You have to tell them. Tells you here you have to tell them, you sign that you have to tell them, and it's your CYN. 3, the goods originated in the territory. So 3 is basically what you've been doing. Once again, signature, company title, date, and email. And once again, Customs has accepted this, but if they're not here, we've been having problems. And this is really just in the last couple of weeks, we've started to see this a lot in Mexico, where we're getting pushed back. Something to note about Mexican customs officials, they normally don't stay in the same post for longer than 6 months. They continually move around. Part of that reason is the corruption, and it's to make sure that any deal that has been made can only last for so long. And then they get moved. That is something that is very common to happen. So that's why when we run through things, sometimes we run through spurts because you get a new customs official who has his own take on something. And in the US, if that happens, we have avenues and ways to get through that process. We can talk to the port director, we can talk to, and while those avenues exist in Mexico, they don't exist anywhere near like they exist here. So make sure the emails are on there. You know, and maybe in 6 months you come back and say, well, they don't care about emails anymore. Now they want to make sure that it's XYZ. So a couple of issues. Number 1, when it turns out it's missing, you can't go back and get one. The original had to be in possession. So I always like to throw the violations out there because normally you people already know them or you're scared enough of them. Maybe your boss doesn't know or somebody else doesn't know. So it's always helpful to show them like, no, I'm not just a fool for running around like this. I'm doing this for a reason. We actually had a client that could not get their IT to help them do something. So I provided them the laundry list of fines that they could get into trouble with if they didn't get this done. They went from getting IT resources in 6 months to 6 hours. Like you just have to know what you're dealing with. So sometimes these are helpful. Mitigation guidelines call for willful violations to be mitigated to a minimum of 50 grand. So if you know you did it wrong and you did it anyways, 50 grand, max of 100, or amount ranging from 45 to 75% of the appraised value. So that's it. That's fraud, right? You know you're doing it wrong and you just keep doing it. Now, if you just do something by accident, one time, you mess it up, it happens. maybe more on the loan of negligence, can be mitigated down to $5,000. So much more stomachable
This is on
number.
the US side though, right?
Yes, ma'am. This is on the US side. So here's the other thing though, don't think because you're shipping product to Mexico that you just issue your NAFTA and you're scot-free. Or you shipped it to Canada and you're issuing it and you're scot-free. You have liability in this as well. If you are certifying product that isn't there, you have some, because what's gonna happen, we had this happen to a customer in Canada. They were certifying product here as NAFTA. They're shipping it to their own company in Canada, who is also claiming NAFTA. The Canadian government said, wait a minute, this product isn't NAFTA. Well, then they said, so then they look, who signed them? Where'd you get these from? They actually came back to the US and started fishing here for how the company here in the US went through that process to assign them. And they did end up getting penalized for this, even though they weren't the importer. They just signed it. So know that that is a real possibility. So that's why you have to make sure your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed on this side. What they do on their side is their business. If you're good on this side, you fill it out properly, you have qualified the product, you're pretty safe.
So CBSA and CBP wouldn't come after you for that type of issue.
CBSA couldn't,
CBS, okay.
but they would call customs and customs.
Okay.
It's no different than going north. If there's
Unless you're like a non-resident importer up there,
No,
then with CBSA, then they would be
Yes.
able to come after you, correct?
You were correct. And my actual guess is customs would still come after you.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, but they double up on you.
You can get doubled up. But if you're not shipping, this was a non-resident importer situation. I'd say that came through that. Well, we died here, right? Certificates only given to the customer when asked. We talked about this already. Who enclosed it? Who said this is okay? We do run into this a lot. It's very common. Make sure it's somebody, like I said, that you think knows something about this product, or even knows what the hell NAFTA is, right? Maybe they know all about their product, but they have no idea what NAFTA is or what it even means to qualify. Also not an uncommon, yes.
I have a question. We have distributors in Canada and Mexico, and on every PO, they will request ship with NAFTA.
Right.
And some of the products, we manufacture, some of the products we don't, but everything is being put on the NAFTA. The same as in the import, so that they match, and we just know one of the producers with the correct country of origin.
Okay.
That's still okay.
Yes. We have a lot of folks that have gone away from just issuing individual ones and they just issue blanket ones because it's a whole lot easier.
We have just hundreds, thousands of parts and hundreds of products. So we normally do issue per order or per shipment.
Right. The most blanket ones I see are massive because they cover everything. Right. So it might be you ship one product 5 times a year, it makes it on the blanket. You know, that's not uncommon for them to be pages and pages and pages and pages long for the blanket. I understand completely why you do what you do. It makes total sense to me why it goes like that. I'm just saying kind of some of what we've seen in the past is that when people issue their blankets, they almost are pulling the parts database of anything that they ship internationally and qualifying for anything that makes sense.
And if it's from China, then could you still put it on and just put no, or you wouldn't even list it on here at all? You just go, just letting it go. So then they were looking at the invoice, they know they're only claiming these particular and these.
You got it. You got it. Yeah. Remember, the only 3 options, or technically 4 options in country of origin: AMAX, US, Canada, or joint.
I've seen China on and maps.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's like, really?
Absolutely. So for that, we are just about right on time. Are there any other questions? And then we'll take about a 15-minute break and come back for Ms. Rita.
On the 10-digit code in one of the books, it says the US.
Customs has come out, going right up. They just put it out maybe 2 months ago, not even that long ago, that they will actually help you in a foreign country with product classification. So if you're exporting something and all of a sudden you're in a big problem, some overseas country, they will actually help you through the process, which I found was really interesting that they're willing to do that. They also just solicited private donations about 2 weeks ago too for helping them do some infrastructure projects. So they're going definitely outside the box of what customs does. The preference criteria, I'm going to walk through these real quick. Does anyone claim A?